As I entered my favorite bar, there was silence. I usually get a shout-out like the guy from Cheers, but I think they were too shocked to react. A few weeks ago, I was beaten so badly that I wasn't expected to survive the day. I was discovered hours after my assault, hidden behind bushes along the park's running trail. I often walk the trail at night to relax, and I've been doing it a lot lately. An elderly couple discovered me and called 911. I had several internal injuries, a lacerated spleen, bruised kidneys, fractured ribs, severe concussion, bruised femur, and a broken arm. I headed to a table at the back of the bar where the three men who beat me were sitting. The fourth person at the table was my ex-wife. I wasn't happy to be this close to any of them. Reginald, the biggest goon at the table, hated being called Reggie. He was a muscled Englishman in the States working for his father. His father, Reginald Wallace II, is a prominent corporate lawyer in the UK. He specializes in assisting American companies that want to keep their wealth offshore and away from the IRS. Little Reggie has a fictional title at his dad's company. He was a lawyer in his home country but struggled to pass the bar here in the States. With little to do at his father's company, he leveraged his title, muscles, and accent to attract married women. He's been mentioned in several divorces when his father's money couldn't silence the husband. Some husbands took the money and left, abandoning their cheating wives to face the town's judgment alone. After Reggie ruined the marriage, he left the wife as quickly as she lost her dignity, only to face more humiliation. This time, things were different. His size and his two friends usually intimidated husbands, but it didn't affect me. I was taught to stand firm when I'm right, even if it hurts. I got hurt. The bar patrons were surprised by my appearance. Many heard about what happened to me, but witnessing it firsthand is quite unsettling. The facial swelling wasn't as severe, but it still had an elephant man look to it. The bruising showed dark yellow shades as it began to heal. Some people urged me to turn back, but I ignored them, even if my body didn't. I held my tightly wrapped ribs with one arm, hoping it would make breathing easier. It wasn't very helpful. The worst part was the bruised femur in my left leg. This injury would stop me tonight. Only 10 feet separated me from their table when Reggie, Sylvia, and his two minions noticed the silence and began to look around. Their shocked expressions were almost funny when they saw me limping toward them. It was clear I was the last person they expected tonight. Reggie said he would end my life next time we met since I wouldn't follow his plan. I was meant to sit back and let him take my wife, use her briefly, and then return to the spoiled person she had become. That's unfortunate for him and her. I don't do that. I believed him when he said he would kill me, but I figured he wouldn't do it here in front of witnesses. Reggie, Eric, and Stan laughed and made comments about my current physical condition. I stopped at their table, standing straight despite the pain in my ribs. Since I ignored their taunts, they questioned my parents' heritage. What's the big deal? They were rude as well. My grandmother was the only family member who loved me unconditionally. Grandmother Beverly took me in without hesitation after neglect allegations against my father, her son. My parents loved the party scene a bit too much. A concerned neighbor called the police, and I was found alone, unfed, and dirty. The authorities took me to my grandmother's and placed me in her temporary custody. Years later, I learned my grandmother gave my parents some travel money, took them out of her will, and sent them off to get me away from them. It turned out to be the best for me. I had a great childhood. Grandma's love and influence have guided me ever since. She taught me to do what's right, even if it's painful, and that there are limits to what you should accept from others. She worked hard to cover the bills and give us what we needed. We lived in the same house as she and Grandpa when he was alive. It was in a typical middle-class neighborhood. She instilled a strong work ethic in me from a young age. Grandmother Beverly passed away in the hospital 2 days after a car accident. I was in college, but I got to her side within hours of being told. It will take me months to recover from her death and act normal again. A week after burying her with my grandfather, I was called to her lawyer's office. I learned that my grandmother was quite wealthy. I didn't know my grandfather was a successful businessman and very frugal with his money. With his passing, everything went to his wife. I briefly questioned why my grandmother worked so hard despite being well off, but then recalled that self-sufficiency was expected of us. We should navigate life and not waste our talents. I was her only heir when she died. The money was mine, but it was in a trust. The trust was clear about its actions. I had limits on usage and benchmarks to meet before accessing the funds. I was expected to pursue a degree or learn a trade to earn a good living. Tuition and living expenses would be covered as long as I maintained a 3.0 GPA or higher. If I drop out of school, I'll get only a third of the trust. If I married before earning my degree, I only received a third. If I don't find a job in my field within a year of graduating, I'll only receive a third. Got it. No free rides allowed. The money from the trust was nothing compared to the love and guidance my grandmother gave me as I grew up. I wouldn't fail her memory. The trust took care of our home while I was at school and became my go-to place on weekends and holidays. I still cherish the joyful memories of growing up there. Despite that, only one material item matters to me. It wasn't in the trust and was given to me without conditions, just some advice and a wish from a dying woman. It was my grandmother's engagement ring. She put the ring in my hand right before she passed away. She took my hands and said to find a good woman to love, start a family, and live happily. It was her last wish. I met all the trust terms before meeting Sylvia, but protections were still in place. A prenuptial agreement was required for any future spouse. I was captivated the moment I saw her. We dated for a few months before she moved in, and a few months later, I proposed. Sylvia had no issues signing the contract. I thought I found a keeper, but I was mistaken. She isn't motivated by money. She prefers engaging in extracurricular activities of a physical nature. I added one item to the prenup, and that's why I'm at the bar tonight. Sylvia knew the ring's history. When I put it on her finger, she promised to honor my grandmother's memory and the love behind it. I alone am to blame for marrying Sylvia. Her attractive face and fit body caught my attention instantly. Sylvia's physical appearance made me overlook her mental weaknesses. Muscle-bound, English-accented, wealthy jerks appeared to be a weakness. My left arm was in a cast and sling. I reached out my free hand to Sylvia. I said nothing, yet she understood my desire. She sat still, looking up at me with desperate eyes, begging me not to take back what she had so easily ruined. I was losing my patience. The pain in my leg and ribs was testing my endurance. The people at this table made my life miserable for the last 3 weeks, and now it was all about to end, more than they realized. Still nothing. I held my hand out, palm up. Her tears started to fall. The crowd behind me is silent, watching the scene unfold. At this point, Reggie and his friends were laughing and teasing me for not being able to control my girlfriend. I stopped being a man because my wife was misled so easily. If I had been better in bed or maybe controlled her, she wouldn't have become a disgrace. Now you. Reggie stood up and walked over to me. I anticipated his reaction, but this time, I wasn't alone on a dark running trail. You'd think a lawyer, even a bad one, would realize that going after the same guy while out on bail for felony assault is a bad idea. Doing it in front of witnesses was foolish. That's Reggie. There was a restraining order against Reggie and his friends, but he didn't break it. I moved to a safe spot, but his actions towards me broke the order, allowing me to defend myself if necessary. I was ready to make a risky legal argument. I took out a stun gun from my sling. When he got close, I was ready and shocked him with the electrodes, sending him to the floor, twitching. I kept shocking him until he fell to the floor and wet himself. Stan and Eric tried to jump me from behind again, just like 3 weeks ago. A few friends at the bar stopped them for me. I got up while they kept hitting Stan and Eric with kicks and punches. I focused again on the now terrified woman. Her lover and his friends could no longer help her. Sylvia, hand me my grandmother's engagement ring now. She cried but held the ring tightly, her left hand clasped in her right. She replied quietly, "No, this ring is very important to me. I want to keep it. We can resolve this. We can do it. I love you. You love me. I regret falling for Reggie. I promise it won't happen again. Reginald just wanted to talk to you and convince you to take me back. You'd ignore reason and attack like a madman. They only defended themselves. I believe what they told me. Sorry, I didn't know they attacked you. You are a foolish woman. You've been with Reggie for weeks, and you think we can still be married? Hand me the ring. Wearing that insults my grandmother's memory, and I won't accept it. You signed the agreement. It's not yours anymore. Give me my grandmother's ring now." I was losing my endurance quickly. I aimed the stun gun at her and pressed the button, making it spark. She saw it in my eyes. I wasn't bluffing. Any more hesitation would mean she'd join her lover on the floor. I suddenly felt someone next to me. The sheriff stood beside me, asking how I was doing. He was a family friend, and I noticed his concern for me. "I'm trying to get my stolen property back, but my soon-to-be ex-wife won't give it to me. The sheriff stepped forward and whispered to Sylvia. She started crying hard as she pulled the ring off her trembling hand. She handed it to the sheriff and collapsed on the table, crying like a child. I took the ring, held it tight, and apologized to my grandmother for giving it to someone unworthy. Before I left, the sheriff gave Sylvia a large envelope, saying she was served. I felt better all of a sudden. The papers were ready a week ago, but she was hiding with Reggie, staying at different hotels for just a day or two before moving on. He hadn't tracked them down yet. Sylvia had to return the ring once she received the divorce papers. I beat the sheriff by a few minutes. The end was starting, and I knew I'd be better off. Not for Sylvia, Reggie, and the others. Reggie and his friends had their bail revoked and spent 4 months in jail before their felony assault trial. During that time, Dad tried hard to get me to drop the charges and let his son go. A felony conviction would stop Reggie from keeping his lawyer license in his home country. Daddy seemed more concerned about the embarrassment from the situation than anything else. He thought that adding enough zeros would get him what he wanted. I had more zeros in my bank account than he did. Also, after I sued his son, I'd receive a lot of his money. I later asked the sheriff how he convinced Sylvia to release the ring so quickly. He smiled and warned her to hand it over immediately or face charges as an accomplice to my assault, which meant at least 2 years in state prison. The judge could have easily proven the charge based on her actions with Reggie. Ultimately, it didn't matter that Reggie and his accomplices spent years in jail for assault, or that Sylvia disgraced herself with adultery and left her marriage with only her clothes. Retrieving my grandmother's ring was what mattered most to me. Even if it was briefly tarnished on Sylvia's finger, the love inside it remained intact. The love in that ring remained strong despite her actions. It would end up with someone deserving. I found her a few years after that night at the bar. Sandy has worn my grandmother Beverly's ring for 30 years to honor her memory. She knew Sylvia wore it first, but wasn't offended that I was misled by a first spouse. It happened to her too. One day, it will go to our grandson so he can feel the same joy it brought me and his great-great-grandmother. That's it for today's story. If you liked it, please thumbs up and comment below. Your support boosts my content's reach. If you're new here, subscribe now. It helps me create more stories for you. Thanks for watching. See you next time.